to satisfy her husband's disturbing desires. She was forced over 6 years of marriage to accept 27 strange men arranged by him. It is only when the final young lover appears that her awareness as a woman finally awakens. She not only brings all 27 lovers into court to testify for her, but after outliving her husband, she also receives all of his property. And this is a true story that once shocked all of England. England in 1782 was an age when women hold an extremely low status. A man's wife is seen as his property. Just like his house and his castle, so Seymour, who inherits a fortune of £100,000 at only 17, becomes the marriage prize countless noblemen dream of. You have to understand, £100,000 in 18th century Britain is basically a fortune large enough to rival a kingdom. So when Richard, a member of parliament with fierce political ambition who needs his future wife's wealth to support him, hears about Seymour's background, he is instantly drawn to her. He begins approaching Seymour with motives that have nothing to do with love, and a young girl dreaming of beautiful romance is always easily captured by a handsome face and carefully woven sweet words. So the two, each getting what they need, soon walk into marriage. The innocent Seymour believes she has finally found true love. She has no idea that this marriage will become a living hell that torments her for half her life. At the wedding, Seymour merely says, "Thank you for becoming my husband," only to be corrected by him instantly.
I should think you mean to thank me for taking you as my wife.
Seymour freezes the moment she hears it. You have to know, the power behind those two sentences is completely different, and Richard's next act of emotional control will dominate Seymour for a full 6 years. Seymour understands what her husband means, but quickly restores her smile and agrees willingly. She has no idea that the door to her hell has just opened. After the wedding, Richard ignores her for 3 whole months. During this time, the two never truly become husband and wife. Seymour, who already wants a child, finally cannot bear it anymore.
I am yours, sir, to do with as you please.
Perhaps this is exactly Richard's mind game. He wants Seymour to become desperate. Once he sees the timing is right, he quietly whispers his special desire into Seymour's ear. Seymour frowns slightly, a flash of unease passing through her heart. But very quickly, she gives an awkward smile and agrees to her husband's absurd request. After all, in an age when women are treated as extensions of men, she has long been taught to obey her husband completely, and the eye staring through the keyhole is her audience. That's right, Richard's special desire is watching. She thinks this harmless-looking preference is just her husband's private fascination. She believes she will soon be able to live an ordinary, warm married life. But reality pours another bucket of ice water over her. Richard is no longer satisfied with simply watching Seymour. He wants to use Seymour as a bargaining chip to win over partners in his career.
Nay, never would I have known that a woman of breeding could be so wanton and so desires fucking.
His friend is stunned when he hears it. He never imagined that a gentleman would discuss his wife's private life with him. But what Richard says next is the real point. He says Seymour likes you. You may try. Although his friend laughs awkwardly, it is still a silent acceptance of Richard's proposal. That night, Richard tells Seymour about this decision. He promises that it will absolutely not affect the feelings between them. But Seymour, who believes in absolute loyalty within marriage, finds it beyond absurd.
All I wish for, madam, is that you do my bidding.
You betray my love for you by asking
It is not betrayal. It is simply my wish. You should wish to please me.
I won't.
This is the first time Seymour says no since getting married. Richard's face instantly darkens, and he turns away, refusing to speak to her. This leaves Seymour deeply hurt. No one has ever taught her how to handle love and conflict between husband and wife. Helpless, she can only swallow her grievance and sadness alone. But Richard does not care at all. All he can think about is how to make Seymour submit. So the next night, he simply brings his friend over and questions Seymour in front of him about why she refuses. Seymour finds her husband even more unreasonable and gets up to leave. But to her shock, her husband begins humiliating her loudly.
You see, my lord, what hurts me greatly is that she will not even try. To think I married a sour-faced prig.
Seymour stops in her tracks the moment she hears it, perhaps for the sake of her reputation, or perhaps to preserve this marriage. She finally gives in, although she feels deeply humiliated. The next day she still asks her husband, "Are you satisfied now?" Pay attention to Seymour's smile here. It can almost be described as relief. It shows that everything she has done is to please her husband, so when Richard says his friend wants to come again and asks if she would mind, she thinks for a moment, then immediately agrees with a smile. You have to know, in 18th century Britain, once a woman married, she could no longer own her own property. This includes the enormous dowry Seymour brought with her, so if she breaks with Richard, she will become penniless. For any noblewoman, that is impossible to accept, so even for her own sake, she can only be forced to accept her husband's outrageous demands, but she never imagines that Richard's twisted desire is like a bottomless pit, with no end in sight. From then on, Richard begins bringing men home again and again. At first, he invites friends and colleagues. Later, he even casually chooses strange men from balls and asks Seymour to entertain them. This satisfies Richard's urge to watch and also makes his political career smoother than ever. He quickly becomes a rising political star, truly getting two benefits at once. But Seymour grows more and more numb, and more hopeless. In the salons of high society, gossip about Seymour spreads like a plague. Men exchange suggestive looks. Women whisper behind her back. They use the cruelest words to describe this supposedly shameless woman. Then, at the darkest moment of her life, a beam of light appears in Seymour's hopeless existence. This is the 27th lover, George. Unlike the 26 men before him, he does not look at Seymour with that disgusting sense of possession. He is handsome, with clear eyes. Seymour is deeply drawn to him once again. With Richard's silent permission, the two naturally come together. At first, this three-person marriage is still fairly harmonious, but as time passes, Seymour's state of mind begins to change. She begins to long for an exclusive and lasting marriage, something Richard clearly cannot give her, so she gives birth to George's child. At the same time, she begins thinking about leaving Richard, but George says they can all live together as four people. Clearly, George does not truly love her either, but Seymour does not see this. Instead, she remains lost in her fantasy of a beautiful future. So on an otherwise ordinary midnight, Seymour runs away with George. She thinks that from now on, she can finally live a happy life. She has no idea that Richard has no intention of giving her up. He can allow guests to use what he considers his property, but he will never allow them to claim it as their own. Furious, Richard immediately finds George's residence, intending to teach him a lesson, but when he pushes the door open, he discovers the place is already empty. By now, George and Seymour have reached the Royal Hotel in London and are living freely and happily. Now they only need to wait for the servant to bring her daughter, and then they can leave for good. Seymour is still far too naive. Richard has already found the servant she conspired with and forced him to reveal where Seymour is, so he immediately brings the child and the servant to London. He uses a lawyer friend to deliver a message. If Seymour is willing to return home with him, he can let the past go. Otherwise, he will sue George for adultery, and he will demand George compensate him for the damage done to his lawful property. What Richard does not know is that this decision will completely destroy his reputation. When Seymour learns of this, of course she refuses to return to that hell. What she wants now is to end this twisted and revolting marriage as soon as possible. When Richard hears this, he instantly flies into a rage. He immediately takes George to court and demands £20,000 in damages. When George hears this, cold sweat breaks out all over him. Even with a wealthy background, he cannot produce that much money. This time, it is no longer a lawyer friend delivering the message, but court officials coming to the door. There is no room left for either side to turn back. At this point, the battle between them officially begins. Before the trial opens, Richard's superior repeatedly confirms whether Richard bears any fault in this farce, because once Richard's reputation is damaged, the political future of their entire team will be seriously affected. But Richard firmly believes Seymour would never dare reveal their secret to the public. He is convinced he will win this battle completely, so he confidently assures his superior that he will never harm his career. In court, almost all the evidence works against Seymour. Every witness's testimony points to George as the third person in the marriage. This makes Richard very pleased, and he believes he will soon win the case. But what he never expects is that Seymour, pushed to the edge, no longer cares about her reputation. She decides to launch a desperate counterattack, to prove that she is not worth £20,000, and to keep George from spending the rest of his life in prison. Seymour decides to expose her husband's true face. In court, Seymour's lawyer states with confidence that he will provide enough evidence to prove Seymour is not worth £20,000. When Richard hears this, he instantly has a bad feeling. In the past, He repeatedly made Seymour confirm that she would never speak about the games between them, and Seymour had solemnly promised him. But now, looking at Seymour's expression, as if she is waiting to enjoy the show, he knows his good days are over. Soon, a scene that shocks all of England unfolds. One after another, 26 men walk to the witness stand. Each of them states, in very indirect terms, that he once had an improper relationship with Seymour. Even more explosive, Seymour actually brings in her gynecologist. The doctor says in public that she suffers from several illnesses, while Richard has no similar symptoms. Clearly, the two of them almost never lived as husband and wife. Even Seymour's children are not Richard's. The moment this is said, the entire courtroom erupts like a disturbed nest, filled everywhere with deafening discussion. Richard is utterly devastated. For George, this reversal of public opinion should be good news, but he cannot feel happy at all. Clearly, George has forgotten that he was originally the 27th lover. Seymour only tears open her own wounds and exposes her most unbearable experiences because she chose him. Yet this devotion does not move him. Instead, his wounded male pride makes him feel deeply ashamed. But things have already reached this point, and Seymour has no way back. So when the court opens again and Richard's lawyer claims the 27 lovers are all lies invented by Seymour and her friend, and that not a single independent witness can prove these unbelievable stories, Seymour does not panic at all. Instead, she looks at Richard with open provocation, because she still has one final witness, her ultimate trump card. That witness is the maid who once served Seymour during her bath. On the witness stand, she directly states that Richard once asked George to watch Seymour bathing. When the servant heard it at the time, she was completely stunned, and when the three of them carried it out, the maid's expression was as disgusted as if she had swallowed a fly. At this point, Seymour has fully proven that she is not worth £20,000, and Richard has no right to receive even a single penny in compensation, because he is the true mastermind behind this entire farce. The whole courtroom erupts in shock. Even Richard's own lawyer is so angry that he walks straight out, but the final result still depends on the court's ruling on this affair.
A clear breach of legality occurred when the defendant eloped to the Royal Hotel London with the plaintiff's wife, and he shared her bed.
Well, then, sir, there is the question of compensation. The plaintiff is making a claim of £20,000. What damages, sir, do you consider proper in this case?
We consider, my lord, that the defendant, Captain Bissett, should compensate the plaintiff, Sir Richard Worsley, the total sum of 1 shilling.
When the verdict is announced, the entire room bursts into laughter. Even Seymour herself can barely believe she has truly won the case. After all, in that era, women had almost no autonomy at all. On the surface, this case looks like the scandal of a noblewoman and 27 men, but in truth, it is a milestone in the history of women's resistance in the 18th century. Seymour's actions undoubtedly awaken the awareness of countless oppressed women to resist and defend their rights. Although the case brings her endless controversy and slander, she does not care at all, because she believes that for George, everything is worth it. But look at George. He may not appreciate Seymour's sacrifice at all. The crowd watching the spectacle whispers among themselves, and mocking laughter rises again and again. George, who should be happy about winning, hears the gossip and pointing around him, and his pride begins to act up again. At this moment, all he wants is to flee the scene quickly. Every extra second feels like torture.
We have our life together now.
How exactly is that, madam?
The single word "madam" instantly exposes George's true nature, but before Seymour has time to think too deeply, Richard appears. Seymour wants to use this chance to end things with him completely. In truth, this marriage has long existed in name only, but to hold on to Seymour's wealth, Richard still refuses firmly to divorce.
Richard, I beg of you, let us put an end to this.
I said no. You are mine, Seymour, and you will always be mine. I will never do as you wish. I will never grant you a divorce.
Hearing this, Seymour refuses to back down. She tells Richard, "I may be your lawful property, but I will never belong to you." The divorce negotiation once again ends badly. Yet this man, who has no moral bottom in marriage, is extremely principled when it comes to work. He voluntarily resigns from his position. He is afraid his family's scandal will damage his superior's political future. Before he leaves, his superior advises him to stop torturing himself, cut ties with her, and divorce her. Richard freezes for a long moment after hearing this. Perhaps he has never truly understood what Seymour wants, and his superior's words will torture him like a prophecy in the days that follow. Although this case leaves Seymour's reputation completely ruined, she does not care in the slightest. Now all she can think about is how to divorce Richard, so the final counterattack begins. She starts actively writing to newspapers, exposing the family's scandals between herself and Richard. When the publication is placed in Richard's hands, his world nearly collapses. But this is only the appetizer Seymour has prepared for him. Seymour's next move is absolutely ruthless. You refuse to divorce me? Then I will buy everything I want, and I will choose only the most expensive things. After all, every bill will eventually be sent to Richard. Yet Seymour, charging ahead in her moment of pleasure, fails to notice that the way George looks at her has quietly changed. Meanwhile, after Richard receives a mountain of bills, his head is practically splitting in two. He never imagined that the wife who once obeyed his every word could now strike this hard. Meanwhile, after buying luxury goods, Seymour returns home and continues writing to the newspapers, because she has a strong feeling that she is about to win this battle for her life. But what she never expects is that the man she is fighting for is about to walk away at the most critical moment.
My love for you has declined.
Seymour can hardly believe her ears. For George, she has almost given up everything.
I thought I could live like this, but I can't.
Are we not moderns?
Not if living like this is being a modern.
The moment she hears his words, Seymour understands. The term modern people was originally George's idea, because back then, they were living together with Richard, so what the term really meant was a marriage that could contain 3 people, as the third person in this marriage. George once enjoyed Seymour's love and the power Richard gave him without restraint, but now, he is treated like a disgraceful outcast, despised and criticized by society. This is something he absolutely cannot tolerate. So all that talk about being modern people is nothing but George's lie and excuse. When the glamorous life and reputation are gone, his love disappears with them. At this moment, Seymour finally sees the man's true face. But what shocks her even more is that George actually advises her to return to Richard. Like Richard, he has never understood what Seymour truly wants, and he has always seen women as extensions of himself. In his arrogance, he believes that once Seymour loses him, she will simply return to another man. But Seymour tells him with absolute seriousness, "I belong to no man. Unfortunately, I live in an age ruled by men." After ending her relationship with George, Seymour returns once more to the house that once caused her endless pain, determined to make a final break with Richard. But even though Richard has been tormented beyond endurance during this time, he still clings to the empty shell of the marriage.
I will grant your wish and return your clothes and jewels, and I will pay you a generous allowance on the condition that you cease all expenditure and that you leave England at once.
You would send me into exile?
Richard's meaning could not be clearer. He can give Seymour part of the property and some freedom, but divorce is absolutely impossible. After all, he still wants to keep relying on Seymour's enormous dowry. Although Seymour is unwilling in her heart, she can only accept it, because she knows this is already the greatest concession Richard is capable of making. At the end of the film, Seymour resolutely leaves the home where she once placed countless hopes, and where she was wounded beyond recognition. Although she is alone now, with her reputation destroyed, her heart feels lighter than ever before. Seymour's story ends with an absurd lawsuit, but through time, it blooms into a flower of freedom. To save her lover, she exposes 27 affairs. She turns her husband into a laughingstock, but also carries the stain of being called a loose woman, is abandoned by her lover, and in the end cannot even obtain the divorce she wants. Yet she does not sink. Instead, she leaves with a body full of scars and goes far away. In the end, she outlives her husband, takes back her dowry, and marries a musician 21 years younger than herself. But this time, Seymour does not follow the usual custom and take her husband's surname. Instead, she makes her husband take hers. This film is never just some scandalous tale of desire. It tells the tragic story of a woman trapped in the cracks of her era, fighting with everything she has to break free, pursue independence, and claim freedom over her own life. When the law treats women as their husband's private property, every act of Seymour's resistance carries the weight of an entire age. Her words, "I belong to no one," speak for countless oppressed women. True freedom never comes from depending on someone else. It means living once for yourself, even when you are covered in wounds, and claiming your own dignity and worth.